Hello everyone, it's Miss Seichter. We are making a still life drawing from multiple different viewpoints. Drawing based on observation is important because oftentimes taking photos of your subject matter flatten out your image, resulting in an image that doesn't look as realistic. Maybe drawing from a photo reference is what you're used to, in which case drawing from observation may not come naturally at first, and you may not think that this is the best way to draw an object. Just like anything in art, practice will only improve your drawing skills. You might later see just how helpful drawing from life is in making a realistic drawing. You need to decide which object you are drawing, and I encourage you not to pick anything too complicated. There is beauty in simplicity, and you might be surprised just how complicated an object is that you otherwise thought was simple. There are lots of different ways highlights and shadows play off of each other in your object, so even if the line drawing portion might be simple, the shading might be very complicated. First, I'll start by making my paper just a little smaller and incorporate a border. This allows each square to be a little smaller so that I don't end up spending too much time on each of my 6 drawings. This also allows a little extra border room when we choose to mat our artwork. With your 12-inch by 18-inch paper, I just recommend making a 1-inch border and separating each square into 5-inch by 5-inch squares. You will end up with an extra inch at the top, and I'll be cutting this off so that it's a little bit more symmetrical. Before moving on to the line drawing portion of your still life project, you need to make sure you have certain tools handy. You're going to need a sharpener and eraser, a kneaded eraser, possibly a blending tool, but you're also going to need an assortment of pencils. Now, if you look carefully at the pencils, you'll notice that they'll have names with numbers and letters on them. This indicates the hardness of the lead. There might be a number B or an H. So all of the H numbers, the higher the H number, the harder and lighter the lead will be. So think of H as in hard. H pencils, since the lead is so hard, won't rub away on the paper as easily if you rub your hand over it, and won't leave dark smudgy marks. The marks you make will be light, but the lead will stay sharper for longer. They're really good for the early drafting phase of your project. Some drawbacks with these, again, they're not great for shading. You don't want to use them later on for shading, but you also want to make sure you don't press too hard with these. You'll gouge the paper, and that'll be problematic for shading or just drawing over your paper later on. The higher the B number, and some of these have pretty high B numbers, the softer and darker the lead. So think of B for black, as in the blackness of the lead. So since the lead is softer, it does rub off on the paper easier, making it great for shading, but really bad for early drafting. You don't want to do your early line drawing with a 6B pencil. For most drafting needs, an HB works very well because it's in the middle and it doesn't leave dark marks behind, and it doesn't really gouge the paper. It's a good medium to choose. So if I were to write with these pencils to prove just how hard they look and how light they look. So this is my 2H. And I'm creating a bit of a value scale. So that looks pretty light. And I'm going to press just as hard with this HB pencil. I'm not pressing any harder, but you'll notice that the lead is already going to be much darker than the one before. And again, HB is pretty much in the middle. It's a good place to be. But as you start shading, you're going to start building up to the darker pencils because they blend a little nicer and a little bit more smoother, and they help you get those shadowy colors a little bit better. Moving on to a 4B. And when I shade, I hold my pencil a little bit more to the side so that the wider part of the pencil is running across the surface instead of the tip. And already you kind of see a bit of a difference between the marks here that you can see every little line and hatch that I made. And just a reminder, I'm really not pressing harder with my pencils. They just naturally appear a little bit darker because of how soft the lead gets as the number gets higher. So when working on the line drawing portion of your project, keep going back to your viewfinder. Either use a small viewfinder with a smaller space inside, or get your viewfinder very close to your object so that it fills most of the picture plane. Your picture plane is the area inside of the space in your viewfinder, and it's also the area inside of whatever space you're drawing in. So you might want to get used to either holding your viewfinder with one hand and loosely blocking in shapes with your other, or you can possibly tape it down so that it's not moving around while you're drawing and you don't have to do two things at once. So a helpful tip is to look at the positive and negative space in your viewfinder. So ask yourself, maybe if your object is too complicated to draw, how can you instead draw the empty space that is around your object instead? That's a helpful thing to do if your drawing's a little bit more on the complicated side. Another thing you can do is, when looking at your object through the viewfinder, use sighting and measuring techniques to see where the contour lines of your object, in my case, the mug, fits on certain landmarks of your viewfinder. So an example of that would be, where is the halfway point on my viewfinder? Maybe I want to make that mark on the side. It's okay if you can't see it because your viewfinder is dark, but I just made little marks where the halfway points are. Maybe you can see it if the lighting is just right. Maybe make marks where the quarter parts are, because it's easy to find a halfway point from here to here, which is here, and then it's easy to find a halfway point from here to here. That might be helpful later on when I'm trying to block in where the contour lines line up in my space over here. So where is the halfway point on your viewfinder? Where is the halfway point on your paper plane? Mark that too. Where does your object intersect certain edges of your paper plane? Is it halfway? Is it a little bit to the left of the halfway point? Is it more towards the quarter of the point? So another helpful thing is to shade much later on, but you still might want to outline the edges of the shadow too, as if it's part of the object, because it kind of is part of the object. And you will have to get used to drawing your object, possibly under some extreme light so that you get some of those good shadows. And maybe from this view, and it's hard for me to see through the camera so that I can see what you guys are seeing, but the top of the lip of the mug is very close to the top corner, but not quite to the quarter part. And same with the bottom. It's somewhere halfway between the quarter point and the corner. And maybe I should start by drawing the negative space first. So I'm going to change viewpoints so that you can see how my whole drawing kind of plays out. And this is what the line drawing portion of my still life looks like. Next, I will be working on adding value through shading techniques.